Ryan Mew is a creative strategist and marketing professional dedicated to building relationships and helping others flourish through products that can improve their business or everyday life. He's also the founder and host of Unmuted Generation, a podcast centered around sharing inspiring journeys, understanding unique and meaningful perspectives, and meeting everyday people from all walks of life. All right, thank you, Ryan, for being here today. I'm so excited to have you on. And just you're one of the first people that I met when I went on this podcasting journey. So it's really exciting to reconnect again now and see where you've gone and where I've come from or gone as well. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, also a podcast host similar to you. I host Unmuted Generations podcast, shameless plug.
Okay.
And a little bit about me. I live in SoCal. I graduated college in 2019, so I'm one of those Gen Zers that everybody tends to hate. I work as a full-time marketer, and I realized, hey, obviously I love business and I love the things I'm doing, but I kind of want to initially the thought was build my personal brand, connect with other business people, and I
Hmm.
realized as much as I love talking to business people, that's 8 hours of my life, and I live another 16. I want to go integrate and talk with other people and uh, listen to different perspectives.
Yep.
So that's why I started a podcast and ended
Okay.
up just meeting a bunch of other people.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what kind of shaped you and brought you to where you are now?
Yeah, for sure. So, my mom is from the Philippines.
Okay.
My dad is from Southern California. His family owned a shop in Chinatown, so they were very traditional growing up.
Okay.
And one thing about Filipino culture is they're very helpful and nice, but they like to compare themselves a lot. So I always grew up in that mindset where I was always closer to my mom's family, but I was always kind of the odd one out where the Chinese background mixed with the Filipino background, I couldn't relate to
Gotcha.
them as much,
Yeah.
and it was always tough. And then to add on to that, growing up, I went to a private school that was primarily Caucasian.
Okay.
So I was like one of the only Asian Americans there. And I feel like back then there was a bit of a stigma to where a lot of the kids didn't necessarily know like how an Asian kid was. They kind of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
watch
Yep.
movies and they're like, "Oh, he's just a kid in the back that plays Pokemon," or he's like a little quiet.
Yeah.
And obviously opened up room for bullying, and it wasn't necessarily the best thing.
Right.
And I think one of the bad parts about it is it caused me to kind of develop a chip on my shoulder,
Mm. Yeah.
which it could be the best thing that ever happens or the worst thing because
Right.
some people they fall victim to bullying and they feel sad and depressed about themselves and they end up going. It's a slippery slope from there.
Right. Yeah.
With me, I kind of used it as like a motivator, where I
Mhm.
was like, okay, well, I'm going to prove these people wrong, get good grades and everything,
Right.
and I just always wanted to be like. The bad part about it was I always wanted to be that the
Yeah.
popular kid, and prove them wrong, uh, and I ended up moving from there where I didn't have a lot of friends to a public high school. So I was
Mhm.
keep in mind I was with the same group of people for 9 years, didn't get along with them too much, and then I'm like in the 600 kid high school
Right.
that's also primarily Caucasian, where they don't necessarily know a lot of Asian Americans there,
Yeah.
and I was like a lot more susceptible to bullying because you're a teenager. Uh,
Mhm.
Everybody just tries to be cool and be the homecoming king per se.
Yeah.
And um, I specifically remember that like the other Asians that were into school, I was always like not the smartest there. Like I was always trying to be sociable. I was always trying to fit into whatever group I can, and I just realized like I didn't have the ability to. Like I wasn't cool enough, or I didn't like growing up.
Yeah.
I didn't have the trends they did, and I specifically remember like going into college, I remember like I failed a lot of tests, so I had to take like this advanced placement class, so I was
Mhm.
able to essentially graduate and go into college. And I was telling them, yeah, I'm going to Cal State Fullerton, and all the kids who I went to school with, they all went to prestigious universities, UCs, UCLA,
Yeah. Yeah.
Stanford's, all those really good ones, or even out
Mhm.
of the state. And I remember the teacher. not gonna name her obviously, but she was going student by student and saying like, "Oh yeah, that's a great college. That's a great college."
Oh,
And, she ended up going to me, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going to Cal State Fullerton," and it was like to me, that was like the dream school, like, I'm
yeah,
so happy I got in, and I
right.
remember she's just like, "Oh, okay," and then she just skipped
Oh,
me. So, it was
no.
it's all this, essentially, like, it
Oh,
kind of what
terrible.
made me the person I am because
Yeah.
I growing up not having a lot of friends and constantly being in this cycle of bullying or not
Uh-huh.
necessarily being able to fit into a group or have a friend who I
Right.
could carry on. It's
Yeah.
just caused me to develop all these chips on my shoulders, and I use that
Right.
for motivation. You know,
Uh-huh.
I obviously started working in corporate at age 19. I was
Yeah.
working all throughout high school, and I did very well for myself, but I it's always like, I think a lot of people see success as like the pinnacle, like that's where I
Uh-huh.
wanna be,
Yeah.
and for me, like once I hit that area, or once I kept hitting every goal, even through
Mhm.
college, and I'm not by far like the most successful guy out there, but if I was
Right.
doing pretty good for myself or compared to others, like
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily feel that happy. Like I would still look at my
Right.
past and be like, oh, I hope I proved these people wrong. And
Right. Yeah.
really, like
Yep.
in the back of my head, I'm
Yeah.
like, these people don't really care about me at all.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
really, I think it involved me just kind of, at the end of the day, just being more comfortable with myself because I
Uh-huh.
wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily uncomfortable looking inwards to myself,
Uh-huh.
and being more comfortable with like who I was as a person as time
Right.
went on.
Yeah.
And that's how I grew to the person I am today, and
Oh,
just lots
wow.
of life lessons.
Yeah, wow. I'm so sorry that you went through that journey of being bullied or feeling bullied by those that you went to school with. It's just a terrible, terrible thing. And your teacher, you don't
Yeah.
have to name her, but oh my goodness, how awful. No, but I completely get it. I am first generation Vietnamese American, so I grew up in a very predominant minority area. So by minority, I mean Black minority and Hispanic minority.
Hmm.
But in my elementary school, goodness, I think I was like one of 5 Asian kids at all.
Yeah.
And so we knew each other and we tried not to be the typical Asian kids that hung out together. But then as we matriculated into middle school and high school, the school kept getting bigger and the population got larger, but the Asians were still all the same. And my last name is Nguyen, or I think in Cali, a lot of people like to call it Wen.
Yeah.
We all kind of pronounce it different ways. They're all incorrect, but we all pronounce it different ways. But so we always look like we're cousins or something related to each other because it's such a common last name, but we never were. Um, but just growing up even in a minority atmosphere and being the minority of the minority and being like the 1% Asian in the entire school was difficult too. And so I totally feel you. I mean, I remember elementary school, I think I had a crush on this little boy, and I thought everything was good, and then he goes and wants to be cool with his friends or whatever and makes fun of me and just like does like the chinky eye thing to his friends. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
that's what she looks like. And I'm like, that broke my heart. So definitely know what you mean about like trying to fit in and not looking like the rest of the group, even though you're in a predominantly Caucasian area and mine is the other extreme. It was still hard growing up in that and finding your place in the world.
Yeah, 100%. I think the even though I went through all those experiences though, like I don't regret it. And
Right.
I don't hold like a grudge against any of them
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, they were just kids. I'm pretty sure
Right.
if they were to do that now, they'd probably see what was wrong. And we've
Yeah.
all made mistakes. Even
Yeah.
us as Asians, I'm pretty sure we've made
Yeah.
judgments about white people or black people or
Hmm.
any type of people out there, and they were just false. So it's like I'm glad it all happened to me because it made me
Right.
the person I am today. And that's kind of how I
Exactly.
go through life in general. Like I've had all these really uncomfortable moments, whether it's you probably understand it too, but
Hmm.
in an Asian family, being compared to every family member and
Oh
saying, "Hey, you
goodness.
aren't good enough,"
Yes.
and then it's
Why
like you
can't
go
you
to
be like your cousin?
yeah, exactly, and then you go to school and it's like the same exact thing.
Yep.
You
Yep.
feel like the odd man out, and
Yeah.
it really sucks. But at the end of the day, like it made me the person I am today, and it's really just using those bad experiences and trying to look at it as a positive instead of
Right.
something that bogs you down. I feel
Yeah.
like in my generation at least, we tend to look at it and play like the woe is me card a
Uh-huh.
bit too much.
Yep, yep.
Bullying does happen, and
Mhm.
obviously like seek out help if you're going through it. But you can't blame your problems that have happened, years ago on
Yeah,
the person you are today. Like
right.
a lot of it comes down to like being comfortable with yourself, loving yourself,
Mhm.
looking at like the bad things about you and being cool with it.
Yeah, yeah, of course, 100%. So if you were to if you had the opportunity to kind of go back in time and confront your bulliers, not necessarily confront them, but if they had the opportunity to get to know one or two things about you, what would you have wished they had known about you that wouldn't have made you feel so isolated and different from them?
Man, that's a really good question.
Thank you.
I would say the first is that, I wasn't I would say the first is just like I'm not that typical Asian. Like a lot of people looked at me because of my race.
Mhm.
They were always surprised when in my culture, it's always one of those things where you don't go talk to elders. You always sit at the children's table, and
Yeah.
probably similar to you when you're
Yep.
growing up. And people would always be kind of confused when I'd go up to them and I'd talk with them, and they think I'm like some super unique guy who's out of
Uh-huh.
the blue. But I'm like, no, I'm just sociable. I just want to talk to you. I just want
Right.
to be your friend. So I think part of it is like understanding that everybody has like a good intention even as a kid.
Yeah.
So if I'm just
Yeah.
trying to talk with you, it's not because I'm trying to be cool. It's just because
Mhm.
I wanted to make a friend. And I think the other thing is just like I was kind of alluding to earlier, like
Yeah.
please don't look at me for my race.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I've had it in every situation. Like obviously the race is one. Another thing, since I've
Uh-huh.
been working in corporate since I was 19, is the age.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
I was 19 and I started working in corporate, I was helping manage over $100 million in financial assets,
Mhm.
and there would be clients that would drop by the office. And you generally, when you think of like a financial advisor, because I was a financial advisor's assistant, they
Uh-huh.
would think like, okay, this guy is like this guy's like in line to be the next financial advisor. Like he's
Right.
gonna help me manage my money eventually.
Yeah.
And they would look at me, they'd be like,
They're
"Are you
expecting
even like
something different.
legal to buy alcohol and stuff?" So
Uh,
yeah, I
which you
remember I
weren't.
would. Yeah, I
You were
know.
19.
Yeah, I would purposely wear glasses, like, every single day at work just to
Hmm.
look a little older and stuff like
Wow.
that, and dress up really sophisticated so
Yeah.
people wouldn't be able to understand my age.
Uh-huh.
And, whether it's age or race, I would tell my bullies just to, like, try to look at it from the other side, you know?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I know also, like, they were probably going on through stuff at home and trying to
Right.
project like, a lot of the people, who ended up bullying me and stuff like that ended up
Mhm.
getting to know a little more of their personal life later on. And
Yeah.
I see that they could have
Wow.
their parents could have been going through a divorce at such a young age or something like that,
Yeah.
and they may have changed as a person, but it's because, as a kid and if you're going through something like that, they probably feel, uh, like they're in a very unique situation that doesn't apply to anyone. So,
Wow. Wow. That's very
yeah.
big of you, Ryan. I mean, I think I would probably look back at the bullies and be like, fuck you,
Well,
like
no, that see, I didn't know if I was allowed to cuss on here, but
absolutely,
yeah, no,
100%.
yeah, no, I mean, as a kid, obviously, if I
Yeah.
was a kid and I was like that, I'd probably wanna I mean, I took jujitsu at the time, so I'd probably try to
Yeah.
duke it out and stuff, and there were a couple situations where, when I was younger in high school, I would get in trouble because, not because I tried to, like, fight anybody, but just because, like, I would say something mean, and I would always try to rebuttal people back.
Uh-huh.
And I wasn't necessarily like I was always just taught to be like feisty.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
be feisty. And it probably wasn't the best thing back then, but
Uh-huh.
my mom always tells me like it's better to do it earlier on in life
Mhm.
than to do it later on, because I don't want to be that same type of person now. So I,
Yeah.
I think with me a lot of it is I lived a lot of life full of spite.
Uh-huh.
A lot of my life was like spiting people, trying to like compete against them and always be the best. And now it's like I want to be that person who's, even if you're my enemy, I want to be in your corner and wish you nothing but the best.
Wow, that's huge
Yeah.
growth there. That's growth for a lot of people that many will never ever, they'll go to the grave without ever knowing that growth. So that's awesome.
Yeah, we see it a lot today, and our whether it's like your political environment or your beliefs of a certain um, policy or religion or something like that. We see a lot
Yeah.
of that annoyance and stuff today, but I always caution people to like try to look on the other side of things. And I think sometimes you'll be uncomfortable looking at the other side of
Hmm.
things. Like I love the title of your podcast because
Thank you.
it's not always like being uncomfortable is like jumping out of a plane, which I have done, but it's not
Uh-huh.
always like jumping out of a plane or trying out a new hobby. Like sometimes it's like trying to talk with somebody and
Hmm.
understand their perspective, even
Right.
if you completely disagree or don't understand it,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
trying to understand that.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. Um, so Gen Z working in corporate environment since 19. What is it like? What is it like other than the people coming in expecting you to be middle-aged white man and then they see you? What is it
Yeah.
like?
A lot of it is well, when I first started, like I said, I was managing a lot of money. And from there I took an internship because I originally was planning to go into sales. And then I realized, okay, sales isn't my forte. I want to go into like marketing.
Hmm.
And I took on a marketing internship, took on a marketing job right after college. I hated it. And I ended
Uh-huh.
up going to Wells Fargo, which is like a very, very corporate environment
Yep.
with 140,000 plus workers, and then I ended up moving somewhere else. And
Okay.
what it's been like as a Gen Zer is a lot of people obviously look at me and they're like, "Oh wow, you're very young for working in here," and a lot of it is having to like take on extra work and try to. Initially,
Prove
I always saw
yourself.
myself proving myself
Hmm.
for my worth and saying like, "Don't look at me as this person." But then I realized like, at the same time, as much I could take on as much work as possible, but I don't wanna be looked upon as a pack mule because that's what
Right.
I'll be looked upon, like the kid who
Mm.
hustles really hard.
Hmm.
Like, I wanna be looked at the person who,
Yeah.
isn't necessarily a kid, but has, like, a lot of confidence. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, so, like, I always focused on having, like, confidence and, talking with different people,
Good.
networking, even talking to,
Yeah.
like, managers who are, like, totally out of my department and doing
Uh-huh.
that. That was
Yeah.
always important to me.
Good, good, good. And I totally hear what you're saying with kind of overcompensating for your age or the way you look or your credentials or anything like that. And I feel it too. In a lot of aspects of what I've done in the past, I think a lot of times you're looking to just prove them wrong, and by proving them wrong, you're kind of like killing yourself in the process, trying to just be everything that do anything and everything, take on every project, do it well, do it better, and then be and end up being the relied on project person. And then they're like, Jasmine will do it,
Oh, I
Ryan will
know.
do it because they're good at it and they'll knock it out in no time. And I might be pretty damn efficient, but shit, like I
Oh,
like some
yeah.
downtime too. I could do 10 times the work you can do, but just give me a break too. I'd like to, socialize every
Exactly.
now and then. So
Yeah. The funniest thing is, like, whenever I've worked at a company, they've always asked me to work on, like, social media campaigns or,
uh-huh.
like, do different things with, like, software programs because they assume since I'm a Gen Z person that I'm, like, the most qualified person to work on it, and half the time it's like, "Oh, I've never even studied this." But
Yeah.
I think a lot of, obviously I had to do some growing up because
Hmm.
it was different, like,
Right.
I feel like when most people enter the corporate environment, they graduate college already and they're very happy. And they know like, okay, this is my next step of life. Like I crossed this finish line, now I'm
Mhm.
here. And working there at 19, it's like, okay, shoot, well, I'm turning like 21 this month. Like obviously, like I'm gonna party and stuff. And I had my fair share of fun, and it definitely was a bit of growing up.
Mhm.
But a lot of it at the end of the day was just kind of asking for help and seeking out like mentorship and stuff. Like I would have never been where I am today if I didn't have like my mentors by my side, kind of directing me the right
Yeah.
path.
Yeah.
They've gone through similar situations, and like I think a lot of people fail to neglect like they see a lot of things as like transactional, like, oh, I want to talk to this person and in return I have to give them something. Like
Mhm. Mhm.
that's why I joined a
Yeah.
program recently called Project Snapshot where I talk
Okay.
with people and
Yeah.
I mentor like high school students, and I don't want it to be like transactional in any way.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, what are some of the challenges working with older professionals? So we've discussed the client aspect and the element of surprise when they walk in, but what about working with older professionals?
Yeah, definitely, getting your ideas acknowledged.
Mhm.
Whenever you have, like, a project or something and you figure out, like, a way to innovate something,
Yep.
you always wanna go to them or even, like, leading well, I'll give you 2 examples. Like, one is, like, projects. So whenever I have, like, a new idea, a new way to optimize something, there's always a lot of distrust there. And some of it could be because they just don't understand the technology because it's new and they aren't
Mhm.
going to put in the effort to do it, which I completely understand from that aspect. But the other portion is just kind of like stubbornness, like, hey, I've been in the industry for like 30 years, like you aren't going to tell me what to do.
Yeah, yeah.
So
The antiquated way is not the and those are the ones that get me the most, I think, is they'll look at somebody who's newer in the field or maybe a little less confident or anything like that, and they wanna bring their years and their seasoned, you know,
yeah,
mentality with it, and it really is, well, maybe you're not what's best for the company. You're a little
yeah.
antiquated and
Yeah, well, I mean, I always try to look at their perspective. Sometimes it doesn't make sense, but at the end of the day, like with the way I look at it is like I'd rather go through it and know it doesn't work instead of
yeah,
not try it at all. So
exactly, exactly.
yeah,
Good,
and
awesome.
then the second thing is just managing people. At Wells
Yeah,
Fargo, I managed a couple people, and it's hard when you're. I was working there when I was 22, so when I was
yeah.
22 and managing people, it's like I don't want to talk down to like 40-year-olds, obviously. So
Right, right. That is hard. That is hard. I couldn't imagine that. My first leadership position, I took over, and I think the lady that I took over for was maybe 20 years my senior. And so when I came in, it was in addiction medicine as a director there. And when I came in as a director, having zero addiction medicine background, but having healthcare nursing background, I was strategically chosen because of my nursing background and because of the community we were in. They needed some credible personality and characteristics to really drive the program and kind of stop with the people stigmatizing addiction and ostracizing the patients, and so really just making that community outreach and connection.
got
And
it.
so the staff that was there were all hired from her straight out of college. And so basically they were raised by her, the previous director,
Yeah,
under her leadership. And so that's all they've ever known. So I come in, no experience in addiction medicine. I'm asking them for their advice. Like, you tell me what you normally do
I
in this
know.
situation, and then I'll make the best, final decision. And it was just crazy, but very, very different because they didn't know what to think. And I had one who was, I mean, every day he kept telling me how much closer he was getting to retirement. He loved his job, but he wanted to also enjoy the rest of his life. So,
Yeah,
but and it was one of those like it was nice, I think, because I had him and he was 65 years old and really enjoyed me as a leader, and not that he was ass kissing or anything. I feel like it was very authentic, but he told me I was one of the best leaders he's ever had. And that was comforting to know that I can lead older generations just fine, and they can show me the respect that I feel like I earn and deserve.
yeah.
So
It's
for
awesome to
sure.
hear.
So what are your thoughts on diversity and inclusion in both school and the workplace?
Oh man. Obviously, um, so I think two things. Like one, I think there's not enough uh things that are talked about with diversity and inclusion. Definitely in the school, um,
Yeah,
we have issues in society where if you go into schools and stuff, they have different clubs like Asian American club, African American club. I'm pretty sure
yeah,
with every ethnicity they have their type of club. My girlfriend
right.
was even the head of like I don't know if she was the head actually, but I think she was like some sort of leadership position in the Chinese club. She
Okay.
immigrated here from Burma. And one of the things I realized is like by creating these clubs, although I think it's a very good cause and it lets you be in tune with your culture, it doesn't
Hmm.
it doesn't speak enough about like it causes people to be in cliques at the end of the day and not
Yeah.
understand each other's cultures. And I think
Huh.
one of the things that they were kind of talking about bringing at Cal States is making cultural studies mandatory, which I
Uh-huh.
think should definitely be like 1000% agree with because
Yeah.
there are things in society that aren't talked about enough. One of
Right.
them is like the international student problem. And
Uh-huh.
we saw earlier this year, not to get
Mhm.
too political with like ICE, and my girlfriend was one of them where um,
Yeah.
the president wanted people to attend classes in the
Mhm.
midst of a pandemic, and if they didn't they would have to go back to their home country, and a lot of
Right.
people kind of they saw it, they glossed over it, I honestly didn't see too much of the outreach, but I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, like this is a really big thing.
Yeah.
Between that and just not understanding other cultures, um, and what could be offensive to one culture, uh, and a lot of people don't understand that, or why things are
Right.
offensive. Like I think cultural studies is definitely something that should be acknowledged and looked at.
Uh-huh.
Uh, in terms of the workplace, I think diversity and inclusion is very important, whether it's like your sexual orientation, your religion,
Right.
your ethnicity.
Uh-huh.
I think it's always amazing to have different perspectives, especially being like a project manager before and having different people and
Yeah.
listening to different perspectives. It's always great to hear. Um, there are some companies that tend to overdo it, and I don't mean that in like a frank way where it's like, oh wow, like they're trying to like fill the bubble with every different culture. But I think because we live in a society where cancel culture is such a prevalent thing,
Yeah.
especially in my generation,
Yeah.
uh, there are companies that try to overdo it in terms of diversity and inclusion and run these campaigns and say
Uh-huh.
how they're the most diverse company out there and they
Yeah.
support this community or this community.
Yeah.
But in reality, once you look at the internals of the
Uh-huh.
company, they don't actually follow it. So I
Right.
think my thing with diversity and inclusion is like you could run as many campaigns as possible if you're a
Uh-huh.
business, like
Yeah.
good for you. But mean what you say. Like if you
Exactly.
if you're saying you support, Black Lives Matters, for
Yeah.
example, like let's hire more African American Black people into the
Mhm.
workforce and have them as the head of management and stuff like that. Like let's
Yeah.
empower that generation. Whereas like we see things where statements are put up and they don't necessarily follow it, and then
Right.
yeah, but they're just doing it just to say they do it. So it's one
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
problems I see.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think that is very, very true. And in a lot of different organizations that I've either worked with or interacted with, I definitely I hear you on that. You know, everybody was very quick when Black Lives Matter movement resurfaced again this year, and they were very quick to put up their statement about inclusion and diversity. But if you walked into a room with senior leadership sitting at a round table, guess who all is sitting at that table? Not very
Yeah.
diverse, not very inclusive. One of the guests that I had in the past, and she's going to be airing in a couple of weeks, was born with dwarfism. So one of
Oh
her
wow.
her major thing is to advocate for inclusion in the workforce, and to
Yeah.
make sure that it was actually a forethought and not an afterthought. So that was pretty
Mhm.
cool talking to her and hearing just the things that she said. And she considers herself a person with disability, and so she addresses the disability aspect of it, and just being able to let companies know and speak on behalf of everyone out there. Just ask us what we need, and don't wait until it's too late and we've needed it for this entire time. Be very proactive in thinking that way. So that was pretty cool. So I
That's
was
cool.
curious. Yeah.
Yeah,
um
that's awesome.
so you had mentioned in one of your blurbs is seeking discomfort. In the past it was for the wrong reasons, and now you've grown, and we've heard a lot of you growing, so that's pretty awesome. But what
Yeah.
did you mean what did you mean about seeking discomfort in the past for the wrong reasons, but then now actually shifting that? Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, of course. I think a lot of it is just being comfortable with yourself. Like, I always tell people, like, the mindset that I had back then is like I would try to I was always good at seeking discomfort, like, whether it's talking to people of upper management or trying out a new hobby, like, I always wanted to do it,
Yeah.
and I've always been, like, a curious person in general, despite, my culture and everything, where we're
Uh-huh.
told live a certain way. And I've always kind of just wanted to expand outside that bubble. But what I was saying back there was like, I would essentially try to pick up a new activity. For example, like, oh, I want to learn how to play the guitar to like impress people, or I want to go get a higher paying job to show the people who are below me per se that I'm like better than you and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And like the spiteful mentality was like
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of it wasn't good for like my mental health.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't good for my physical health because I was
Yeah.
always like pushing myself too hard. And it got to a point where I just realized that I was talking about it with my mom actually, who
Yeah.
I go to for everything. And even though I don't agree with her on a lot of things, one of the things she told me is like, just realize like all this time and effort you're putting towards like somebody who you're like spiteful against,
Uh-huh.
like they aren't even thinking about you, like not 1 second.
Yeah.
And a lot
Yeah.
of it allowed me to be listening to that and really just focusing on being like comfortable with myself and like
Mhm.
my own. We always hear like love yourself and everything, and like the good and
Right.
everything, but like a lot of times it's like confronting your demons and like looking
Yeah.
like, look, I was annoyed at people for like 18 years of my life. It's like
Yeah.
I I I always try to do things for other people. I always try to overcompensate to prove I'm the best. Like trying
Mhm.
to like actually be humble about that.
Yeah.
It's tough. So like I had to really like seek discomfort in myself, and there were a lot of different ways I did that.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but it was just like a really great experience that I'm glad I went through it because
Yeah.
I always talk to people and they're always like, "Oh wow, like you're like you seem really in tune with yourself," or you're like, "How old are you?" type of thing. I get that
Right.
question a lot now because
Yeah.
it's like I feel like I confronted a lot of them a little
Yeah.
earlier,
Uh-huh.
and
Pretty
and
early,
it
yeah.
always yeah, and it always surprises them and stuff. So
Yeah. No, no, that's awesome, and that's a great point, right? Because a lot of times I feel like our motivation is very out of spite. You
oh
know,
yeah,
how good of a grade can I get on this test as compared to such and such? Or how, much more of a degree can I get? Or how many credentials can I get? And make myself impressive and I look, great on paper. But, I think a person gets burnt out doing that. It's very exhausting trying to keep up with the Jeffersons, really, and doing things out of spite or doing things because you're being competitive in a bad kind of way, not competing with yourself, but competing with everybody around you. And I think you're totally right, is being in tune with yourself and doing something for your own personal well-being, not because you're trying to prove somebody wrong. Is That's really important, and that's huge. Like, for somebody so young to say that is impressive. So great
thank you.
job.
Yeah. Definitely. We definitely live in like a more competitive society
Hmm.
nowadays. I think it's just preached upon in college and
Yeah.
education and your family culture personally. And
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
with me, I've always been the competitive type where like whether it's in basketball or
Right.
sports or anything, I'd always want to beat the other person. And now it's like like I the people, like a lot of it was just my support system. Like I only wanted to keep people around me who weren't competing against me, but
Yeah.
somebody who I could tell my entire story, even my ambitions to, even if I wasn't even close. And like we
Yeah.
don't see enough of this where it's like I tell you all my ambitions and then you're just like, good job, Ryan. Like
Yeah.
like here are my ambitions. Like
Yeah.
we need to have more. It comes down to like insecurity at the end of the
Yeah.
day, I think,
Yeah.
and just being secure with yourself.
Yeah. But then at the same time, having the right people in your circle too, right? Always
Yeah,
having those
definitely.
cheerleaders. I know earlier you mentioned your mentors. Are so who all is your mentor? Are they professional or are they family?
Yeah, so like part of it is obviously like mentor. A lot of people look at mentors sometimes and they look at it like, oh, this person needs to be like years and years older than you.
Uh-huh.
Uh in terms of like a career sense, like I have mentors who are like a couple years older than me, like 1 or 2
Yeah.
years, and they're younger mid 20s.
Uh-huh.
uh, I have a couple people, one in particular, his name's Jackson Yamagita. He'll probably bash me for mentioning his name, but he just taught me like at the end of the day that work is like only 8 hours of your life, because this
Yeah.
guy, I mean, he works, he does a great job, and then because like he has the capacity to do it, he tries to travel the world, interact with different cultures. He
Nice.
actually he actually took a life-changing trip down to Africa and lived in a
Huh.
small village down there, and
Yeah.
it really changed his perspective on life. And that him just opening his bubble up to like every single demographic and
That's cool.
psychographic, like
Yeah.
that really helped
Yeah.
me because his message translated to me. And then
Yeah. Yeah.
obviously like your parents, even if you may agree or disagree with them, sometimes they're still your mentors. Even my girlfriend, like she's from another country and she's very she has a very smart and sophisticated perspective, and I
Uh-huh.
always think like mentors are people who you could learn from. So
Yeah.
whoever you really care about and their perspective, those are your
Oh,
mentors.
that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
great. And so there's probably people around you in your life that don't even realize you consider them a mentor, and but they're a positive part of your life, and you rely on them for good advice or bad advice, whatever the case may be, but you rely on them to just you really just put it all out there, and that's awesome.
Yeah,
That's great.
1000%. It's good to obviously like uh I think we tend to obviously listen to good advice
Hmm.
and tend to follow it exactly all the times, but I like
Yeah.
people who obviously give their advice and say, like, "It's up for you to follow or not,"
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
use
Yeah.
every message applies to your own journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. That's so much wisdom in such a young man. I love it.
Appreciate it.
So tell me a little bit more about Project Snapshot. I know you mentioned high schoolers and guidance, but tell me a little bit more.
Yeah, cool. So, one of the things that I kind of realized over the pandemic is that we have a lot of people who are two really important groups. We have one where they're transitioning from high school to college, but
Hmm.
obviously Zoom, uh, that doesn't give you like the whole experience. Like you don't. I remember when I
Yeah.
first got into college, like I got to meet my friends for the first time with orientation. Got
Yeah.
to sit and have lunch with them, collect their numbers, meet our mascot and take a picture with him, like really
Yeah.
stupid stuff like that.
No,
But it was
great.
like meaningful,
Yeah. Yeah.
and if you're like in Zoom, like I'm not gonna meet people. Like that's just not
Right.
it's just not a good way to meet people, I
Yeah.
would say.
Yeah.
Or not a good way to make friends. So basically like part of Project Snapshot is leading high school students
Hmm.
who are kind of transitioning into the college stage and kind of mentoring them through what to expect,
Yeah.
the pitfalls they may face and the successes they may face once COVID-19 ends,
Yeah.
hopefully. And
Soon.
not just like the education portion, but also the life. Like, hey, you are probably going to party a lot. Don't spend a lot of your money on that. When you get a
Yeah.
job, invest in your 401k,
Right.
things like that. So that
Okay.
was like one part of it. The other part is obviously like we have a lot of college students who are going to graduate and possibly look for jobs. And I think
Yeah.
there's a big issue with our education system where um, at the end of the day, it kind of operates like a business, and
Yep.
a lot of people look at like,
Yeah.
hey, I got this degree. It's like my golden ticket. That's what I always
Yeah.
call it. And
Right.
and they think they could get a job.
Mhm.
I had so many friends once I graduated where they thought just because I have this degree, I'll be able to get a job that pays
Right.
60, 70K. I can move out of my parents' house
Yeah.
and live in an apartment. And that is like so far from the truth.
Yeah.
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 So it's really just leading them and trying to give them the best possibility to possibly get a job in the
Yeah.
future. And
Yeah.
it was started by students over the pandemic.
Okay.
I actually interviewed the founder, and me and him, I consider him a good friend now. He
Uh-huh.
lives in Denver, so I guess we're like e-pals. And he's a great guy. And
Yeah.
our mission, I'm not a part of like, I'm essentially a mentor there. So I help mentor these high school students.
Yeah.
But I'm not, I think it's just a very, very good organization
Yeah.
for any type of student to be a part of.
Okay. So are you e-mentoring?
Yeah, so I'm e-mentoring. So I have two students who I'm e-mentoring. One
Okay.
of them lives in Georgia, and the other one lives in Canada.
Okay.
And they're both interested in marketing,
Yeah.
which is really cool.
So
It's
you're
like
matched up by interest and industry.
yeah,
Okay.
basically. So one of
Okay.
them is like marketing, and then the other one is like marketing and acting. And I'm not an
Uh-huh.
actor by any means, but I think because I have the podcast and like I'm, everything
Uh-huh.
like that,
Yeah.
just providing her whatever insights I can. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I think it's just a really good thing because at the end of the day, like I said, mentorship's really important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talking to this younger generation
Yeah.
and letting them know like it's not all about clout. It's not all about like
Right.
getting the best TikTok and views. Like try to apply that at least to like your
Yeah.
LinkedIn and
Yeah.
your networking and build your network.
Yeah. I think that's really important. That's incredibly a great message that you just said right there. Like it's not about the clout. It's about making sure that you are applying what you're applying on social media into your actual real life. If you put half the investment there, your life could go pretty smoothly. I think a lot of younger generation nowadays are the younger kids, like because I have a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old, so
Yeah.
they're there. They're
Yeah.
there where they're scrolling through every day, and I'm like, that's not reality, right?
Oh
So,
yeah.
we went from Instagram to TikTok, and I'm just like, Instagram was all the pretty girls and the cute guys, and then now it's TikTok, and it's who has the snazziest moves or dance or most creative, and so that's
Yeah. I was
important.
I was talking with my girlfriend the other day, and one of the decisions I actually recently made was to use Instagram as like a photo album once again. Because remember
Uh-huh.
when Instagram and
Yeah.
I sound old, but remember when Instagram and Facebook first came out, and like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember all my friends were using it to
Yeah.
play Farmville and also like use it as a photo album and
Uh-huh.
post pictures. And now it's like nobody uses Facebook. Like that's like considered like the old person thing.
And
Everybody
what's
who posts,
MySpace?
yeah, exactly. And everybody posts stuff on Instagram and
Mhm.
TikTok to become an influencer when in reality that's like 0.01% of the population and it's
Yeah.
not like a career. And
Yeah.
the most dangerous thing about social media with this younger generation is like what you post
Uh-huh.
because they may not know, but like, hey, if you want to be a CEO in some time
Uh-huh.
and they pull up that old video of you,
Yep.
you know,
Oh
whatnot,
my
you aren't going to
gosh.
get promoted. So,
Yeah.
um, not necessarily like trying to do a warning or anything and say like, oh,
Right.
well, don't post, but just like, hey, if
Just
you're going to
life
go out for
lessons.
drinks, maybe leave your phone at home. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Don't record everything because it'll resurface at some
exactly.
point. Uh-huh.
1000%.
Um, so if somebody is interested, so two-part question.
Yeah.
If someone is interested in being a part of Project Snapshot, what do they need to do?
Yeah, so if they're interested in being a part of Project Snapshot, all they have to do, I think fall is closed for now, but when
Uh-huh.
spring opens, because they do it per semester, you would just go
Mhm.
onto Project Snapshot's website and apply over there, like I did.
Okay. Okay.
And you just select mentor if you want to be a mentor or a
Yeah.
mentee. Mentee is obviously,
Right.
yeah, and yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. At the end of the day, like I'd say, like Project Snapshot at the end of the day is all about mentorship. So if
Yeah.
you feel like you want to mentor people and pass on like to another generation, like start a podcast, like start an organization on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, or like create like some sort of weekly Zoom call to where you could interact with the younger generation and
Yeah.
teach them your lessons on life. But obviously, like I said before, provide advice, not like this is the magic formula to succeed.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Mhm.
And mentees, what's the age selection group?
I think I think there's 2. I think one is high school or
Uh-huh.
secondary school if you live in
Okay.
Canada, and then the second is, college.
Okay.
So people, I think the age group is primarily probably, like, people in their late teens to, like,
Uh-huh.
early 20s.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So what does it mean to be a creative strategist and marketing professional?
Yeah, well, like a marketing professional, I graduated cum laude as in marketing.
Uh-huh.
Didn't always want to do marketing. I was originally in sales, and
Okay.
creative strategist just in the fact where it's like, I think there's a lot of people when they get into business and they tend to just do like routine tasks,
Yeah.
and it's always like, hey, file the papers here,
Yeah.
do this project. And as a strategist, like I always try to be a couple steps ahead,
Yep. Yeah.
in terms of everything and be creative about it.
Okay.
So that's really what that means.
Okay. Okay. So like
Yeah,
innovative in a way.
yeah, innovative.
Thinking
Like it's
outside the
really,
box.
yeah, it's really important to be innovative and like
Uh-huh.
I know there's a lot of people who obviously work like 8 to 5 and
Mhm.
or I always call it 8 to 4 sometimes because some people just slack off the final hour. But I always think it's important, like even after 8 to 5, to try to figure out ways to be innovative, whether it's in your professional life or also
Yeah.
like your personal life, and
Yeah.
strategize ahead because never know.
Keep evolving, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Just like you were saying, the one of the suggestions for being a mentor doesn't have to be being a part of a community or an organization like Project Snapshot. It could be creating Facebook pages, communities, creating a podcast, any of the above are
yeah.
different ways to really tap into that population of people that you'd like to influence. So,
Yeah, 1000%. And I'm always like, when people are somewhat hesitant, I'm like, what's holding you back? Like, if it's
right.
like funds, like you're saving up for something, or
Yeah.
you're trying to pay off some bills,
Right.
like completely understand. But if it's just like you have some free time and you want to do this, like, what's
Yeah.
holding you back? Honestly.
Exactly. Exactly.
Hmm.
Comfort kills. Get comfortable
Yeah,
with being uncomfortable. So,
nice plug-in.
of course, I have to.
Yeah,
All right, so let's discuss your podcast a little bit. So, Unmuted Generations, I've listened to your intro, and then, I understand that you're just kind of looking at speaking with different guests, trying to tap into their different journeys, and tell us a little bit more about it.
yeah. So It's kind of funny actually. So I'll tell you the reason why I started in Media
Okay.
Generations. The main reason was because I was hearing a lot of negative news, like just
Mm,
online amidst the pandemic. It was
yeah.
always wear a mask or wear no mask.
Yeah.
Um, you know, Republican, Democrat, even if it comes down to that. And it was getting really crazy to the point where I was like, the only enjoyment I was having was actually like networking with different business professionals
Mhm.
and chatting with them and the ones who would be open to like having coffee chats.
Yeah.
And I was like super happy with it. But the one thing I kind of realized is like, okay, like I want to start a podcast. I could just put these coffee chats essentially into podcast and hopefully somebody learns from their journey because
Right.
it's pretty much the same thing, getting to know them, interview them, have a casual conversation. So Unmuted Generations is a podcast. It was originally like a business only podcast where I just talk about business subjects
Yeah.
with people. And then I realized going down the line that it was starting to get a little tiring and
Yeah.
fatigued, and I wasn't like fully ingratiated in the conversations because
Uh-huh.
there's only so much you could talk about business, and I feel like I was kind of like centering my bubble a little too much. So I
Yeah,
decided I
yeah.
wanted to expand it. So now it's in Muted Generations is a podcast about perspective,
Uh-huh.
understanding different perspectives, whether it's in the business world, health world, um, like mental health world,
Uh-huh.
and then meeting with everyday people because I think it's really important sometimes to talk with people who aren't necessarily C-level executives,
Uh-huh.
but people who live everyday lives and they don't work for the biggest company, but they have an entrepreneurial
Mm.
side business and it's doing really good. So
Yeah,
just
yeah.
talking with everyday people and just kind of chatting with them about their journey and their perspectives on life and what got them to where they are today.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So what are some of the challenges that you found other than feeling like you kind of put yourself into a bubble at the beginning? What are some challenges you've had with either the technical side or interview and guest side or anything of the above?
Yeah, I would say the two biggest challenges I run into is that the first is people always like sometimes when I get guests who come on, they ask me like, "Hey, what's your demographic? Like, what's the amount of views you get and stuff like
Uh-huh.
that?"
Huh.
And I'm always pretty honest with them, like,
Yeah.
"Hey, like I don't have a specific demographic. Like I'm talking with people who I'm genuinely interested with.
Yeah.
I don't need to follow a specific strategy because it's not like
Right.
this is my life. Like I have a job,
Yeah.
you know? So it's like,
It's not making money.
yeah, it's not
Yeah.
making money. It's I'm losing money from doing this if
Yeah.
anything. But
Yeah.
it's just like I I think it's hard for some people to understand that I have like a genuine intention with wanting to understand their journey as
Uh-huh.
it's told,
Yeah.
as opposed to like trying to get them the most clout and followers and grow their
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely one hard part of it.
Uh-huh.
The other hardest part is probably the balance. Because I do work full time, so I work
Mhm.
8 to 5 every day. I'm on a full time schedule. I do the mentoring thing at Project Snapshot, and then I shoot and release generally like 2 episodes a week.
Uh-huh.
So, trying to figure out how to change the format and stay on
Yeah.
schedule and
Yeah.
balance out your time, like, it gets really draining and tiring, and every
Yeah.
now and then I'll have to take a break. But a lot of it is just like, um, a lot of it, like, although I could say like, "Oh, yeah, I automated this or did this and that to make it easier on my life," like, a
Yeah.
lot of it is just remembering, like, why you're doing something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, listened to, I think it was so it was an interview, and I it was somebody who just hit her million view or something like that on YouTube. And there was another one on podcast.
Mhm.
It was a millionaire journey. So it was people who made their first million, whether it was downloads for YouTube, downloads for podcasts, first million bucks,
Yeah.
whatever it was just the millionaire journey.
Mhm.
And they spoke on the consistency of releasing whatever it is you're releasing. So if you're planning on doing it once a week, then do it once a week for the next year and see where it goes. Don't stop and don't give up. Like we spoke earlier about how variable our downloads are, and sometimes it's only this much and sometimes it's this much, and we're not quite sure what the secret sauce was
Oh,
to the good
yeah,
ones.
yeah. Uh-huh.
And and but not to be discouraged and just continue to do it. And they were
Yeah.
saying, like the first couple of months was just like it was daunting because you're putting all this work, you're doing post production work, you're doing, buying all this equipment and everything, and it just, you're getting like 5 views. 5
Yeah.
listens, 5 downloads. And so, and like I said, it's my mom is my biggest cheerleader, so I know she puts this stuff on repeat.
Yeah.
So I really don't know, like my views are kind of skewed. you
Yeah,
know?
but at the end of the day, like, my whole thing has always been like, look, if I could inspire one person
Mhm.
to like go outside their
Exactly.
comfort zone and
Yes.
do something, like
Yeah.
that's all that matters. Like I could there have been times where I've shot and I've had like, okay, hundreds of views and it's worked perfectly for me. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that's always nice. But
Yeah.
the ones I always like is when I release it, I may or may not get the views, but I get somebody who messages me and say like, "Oh, I'm actually looking to start a podcast now, and like I'm actually surprised you were able to start one. Like, could you show me how to do this?" Or like,
Uh-huh.
"Oh, your message spoke to me." Like
Mhm.
that's all I care about at the end of the
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
And I think
Exactly.
people sometimes misconstrue that because like I said, we live in a very like clout chasing society where everybody wants to grow their
Yeah.
business and they I mean
Yep.
at the end of the day it's like look, all I want to do is share your journey,
Exactly.
and I'm asking
Yeah.
for like an hour of your time.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll be hard, but you know, if you're trying to grow it and make it like a business and grow a side income, like
Uh-huh.
best of luck to you, you know.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah, like
exactly.
obviously I'm pretty sure you would agree too, like
Yeah.
that would be nice for you or me, but like
Uh-huh.
it's not like our primary goal at the end
Yeah.
of the day.
No,
Yeah.
no. We have day jobs. We're good.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
it
That's it.
happens, great. If not, oh well. We're
Yeah,
having fun.
exactly. Yeah.
And I think as long as you continue to have fun doing it and meeting amazing people, that's the most important thing. So where are you meeting your guests? How are you finding them?
Oh man, like a lot of it is you know, I would say about like 60% of my guests are just networking and like
Okay.
putting my name out there and
Yeah.
messaging a random person and saying like, "Hey, I saw your story. Like, I think your story is interesting. I'd love to
Yeah.
chat."
Yeah.
There have been other people where it's like, you know, they're my friends and a friend knows a friend, you know, but a
Yeah.
lot of it is
Yeah.
just kind of messaging people at random. And I think people sometimes are a little intimidated because they're asking for somebody's time. And they look at it more of like a job application, like, oh, they may not notice and it's like a rejection. But I
Yeah.
always say like if you submit like 10 job applications, you may only
Uh-huh.
get one that's noticed.
Yeah.
But like with a podcast, if you're openly telling somebody like, I only need an hour of your time, I want to talk about your journey,
Uh-huh.
and I'm gonna do all the editing and post production and post it and create like
Yeah.
an ad, like a lot of people are like, sure, you know,
Yeah.
like I don't
Yeah.
care, you
It's
know.
free marketing. Hey, why
Yeah, it's
not?
free marketing, you know, like I would
Yeah.
spend this hour on my couch and I'd love to share my journey
Yeah.
and you would be surprised like the amount of people who I've been able to contact who are like in leadership positions just
Uh-huh.
saying like I'm interested in considering you.
Mhm.
Like I think
It's
some people
flattering.
think yeah, some people
Yeah.
think it's like, "Oh, you are taking my time," and no,
Yeah.
it's not that at all. They're like, "Wow, you'd consider me?" Like, I
Yeah.
haven't even done anything, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's flattering for sure. I remember the first time I was invited to join a podcast. They were interested in me because I used to be in the military and then I was a nurse leader and it was a nursing podcast. But it turned out the whole conversation shifted to like nurse leader and traveling as a nurse and stuff like that. So it was never even like we had a tiny little focus on my military life and background, but it just completely shifted once we started speaking and it was really fun. It was a good time. And I thought for sure that it was such a great podcast to me. I'm pretty biased, but it was such a great podcast that I was like, for sure, people are going to be, knocking down my door, asking me to come to their podcast. And so I was a little bummed when I didn't hear from anyone, but it was a small podcast. They were just starting out. And so I'm not expecting, but I did have more and more followers on LinkedIn. So that was unusual.
That's cool.
Um, I don't know if it was something I was doing differently or what, but that's when I kind of had that taste of what it's like. And I've always listened to podcasts driving home. I live 12 miles from work here, but I'm
Mhm.
like on the road for an hour and a half during traffic. So it's
Yeah.
absolutely, you probably can relate in California, but it's
Oh,
it's
yeah.
absolutely dreadful here. Miami traffic is the worst. I'm from DC originally. DC is bad too. LA's bad. I've been there.
Yeah, LA
But
is
it's
very
pretty bad.
bad.
There's only one way in and one way out. DC at least
Yeah.
you had back roads, but here not so much.
Yeah, LA
Um
is horrible in terms of traffic, but I think it goes back to like what you were saying,
yeah.
going back a little, like you just want to talk with people and have a conversation. Like I enjoyed the fact that like I enjoy the fact of your podcast's like premise and the
Uh-huh.
message and stuff. And like
Thank you.
I've talked with some people where it's like they're saying, "Oh, well, my podcast like." I already hired a videographer and
Uh-huh.
we have like this social
Yeah.
media strategy and everything. And I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, if it works, it works. Like,
Yeah.
awesome, dude. But that's not my goal with this.
Yeah.
Like
Not
I'm
at
just
all.
an extrovert. I like to talk with people, and more than being an extrovert, I like to. Um, I consider myself like a scholar of life, and
Uh-huh.
I know it sounds like kind of an
Yeah.
arrogant thing to say when it rolls off the tip, but
No.
I think it's just really important to like understand other perspectives and like
Yeah.
expand your bubble as
It
much as
is.
possible.
It is. It helps with you to evolve as a human too. I feel like when I left and joined the army, I realized there was more to life than DC. When I
Yeah,
thought DC was diverse, it was diverse and it's probably one of the most diverse places I've ever lived or been. But there was so much more I didn't know about like people in the United States, you know? Like I
yeah,
met guys and girls from so many different corners of this country that I would have never imagined and their different lifestyle and how they grew up and the farms they lived on or their burros they lived in and just all these different things. I learned so much like knowing and I feel like that's part of the whole comfort kills journey is to meet people from different places and everything. Every single one of my guests have been everywhere. I mean,
yeah.
one was a digital nomad calling in from Vietnam, but she's a Canadian Ukrainian.
Oh
There was
wow.
another who I just interviewed that's releasing. It's releasing tonight, and she is Italian Australian out of Australia. And then on Thursday morning, I have one calling in from the Himalayas. Like it's just mind blowing. All these people with all these very different journey. And if I, like you said, touch one person's life with their story, that's all I need. You know, and everybody I'm speaking to, they're touching my life. You know, there's something I'm walking away and learning from them that it's good for me. It's my growth.
Yeah,
It's my evolution.
yeah.
So
And that's what it sounds like. And that's like with me at the end of the day.
yeah,
Like it may sound selfish to say like I'm doing this like for myself and my
yeah,
own personal growth,
yeah.
but it's the truth. And hopefully, if somebody comes along with the journey, they enjoy it.
Exactly,
Hmm.
exactly. All right, so if you can put a message on a billboard, what would it be?
Man, I know you already said comfort kills, so you took that. Um, shoot. I would just say like try to block out the noise as much as
Okay.
possible. Like it sounds a little block out the noise. That's what I would say.
Yeah,
There's a lot of different I think when sometimes people think of noise, they think of like, oh, block out what's going in like your political atmosphere, block out what's going on in your country and stuff like that.
yeah,
Or block out more importantly people who you don't agree with, which I think is like a big no-no. But
yeah,
I think it's just really important to like figure out like what your goals are in life. I think one of like the most life changing things for me is like I'm always working, I'm always on the go. I haven't taken a break since I was 16, so
yeah.
I've literally been working for like 7 years, and I took a weekend off. Like I did nothing, and I evaluated all my goals, like what I wanted to accomplish in the next couple of years, and
Mhm.
it was really like life changing in a way because like it made me realize like okay, I in all this time I dedicate to like trying to make people happy in this aspect or try to do this like that's just really like noise in my life or
Yeah,
like with social media like I'll just not use it and I'll just
yeah.
like live the way I want to live and it really helped me out. So just blocking out the noise, especially if you're younger and listening to this,
Uh-huh.
not focusing on like popularity or people who bother you. It's not worth your time. Like just
Yeah,
focus on the things that really matter because like life is way too short.
yeah.
Mhm.
Awesome. Um, all right, so sometimes we don't know what we don't know. What should I ask you that I didn't know to ask?
What should you ask me that you didn't know to ask?
Yes.
Oh man, there's a lot of things about my life that have been
Yeah.
really crazy.
Uh-huh.
Um, I would say like one of the craziest things that, and you don't need to ask obviously, but just like I think there's a lot of people who deal with like mental health problems,
Uh-huh.
and it's
Uh-huh.
still stigmatized in society
Yes.
to have mental health issues. But
Mhm.
even with me, like I've gone to a therapist before. I went
Yep.
to a therapist for like
Yeah.
4 years, chatted with them about all my life's problems, and
Uh-huh.
just like I think that I think that's important to where if you're like listening to this and going through an issue or a problem that you should still you know
Yeah.
seek out help because sometimes
Yeah.
like you may not have the family to back you up, you may not have like the friend group or support system, and that's
Mhm.
where therapy comes in. So I think
Yeah.
that's really important.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely very important. One of the ones, the gentleman I interviewed, Jiva Sam, was actually a marriage mentor. But for me, I felt like it was very much therapy as well,
Mhm.
and offered very, very great advice. But really, just in that message that he was relaying was just for couples to know that, sometimes if you feel like you're at the end of the road, you're still not at the end of the road yet if you haven't seen mentors and therapists to help you and guide you back into the right direction. So definitely very
1000%.
important. And you're right, mental health is a big issue and very stigmatized. People are still very ashamed of it. Growing up as a military veteran, and then my husband being a retired military veteran, definitely in the military community, guys don't like to talk about that.
Oh, yeah.
It's just
It's
something
all
that guys and
yeah.
girls.
It really does work, and I think that there are times when, like, the world is gonna be against you.
Yeah.
Like, literally, like, you may not get along with your family or your friends at a certain time,
Uh-huh.
and if you really, like, instead of being depressed and going and making a bad decision, that
Right.
can potentially affect your life, I think you should definitely talk to somebody who
Absolutely.
specializes in
Yeah.
preventing that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. There are specialists out there for you, and so please don't give up until you've tried every absolute possible resource you can. Um, a-
1000%.
and I actually recently had an intervention with a friend, and I spoke to her father. We're having a serious intervention. It's been a problem for us. But he went on to say, and we're speaking in Vietnamese, and he went on to say that, he understands that she has depression, and he understands that it's always been difficult her entire life, and this and that. And I thought, man, this is like an old Vietnamese guy telling me he understands depression. Like, that is a million times progressive for somebody of his age, of that nationality. It's unheard of. So I was very, very impressed. So I know that there's progress in the world, and I do agree that we definitely need to bring that out more. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Um,
One last thing too.
yeah,
I know there are some people who are probably really sad because of the pandemic,
yeah,
and there are other people who are probably like, "Oh, why are you sad? Like my life
yeah,
still goes on." But I think one of the most important things I learned from therapy and also just talking to different people is that, like, everybody's pain is relative to them,
uh
to where it's
huh,
like I've had friends and I've been like, man, you should just suck it up and work, but I didn't
right,
understand, like, back then I didn't understand like what was affecting them,
uh huh,
and I wasn't being sensitive, and then also with them they would be like, well, I don't understand why you're sad. Look at your life. You got a job right out of college. You graduated cum
yes,
laude. I mean, everything's going well, and I'm
yeah,
just like, no, like everybody's. So really, at
yeah,
the end of
yeah.
the day, focus on your own stuff.
Great, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. Is there anything else that we've left uncovered?
No, I think you got everything. I really appreciate you having me on.
Great. No, thank you.
It's
Thank you
awesome.
for joining me. I know you've had a long work day, so I appreciate you sending everything over to you today and making some time out for me. So
Yeah,
thank you.
no problem. No problem. Anytime. Thank you so
Thanks.
much.